we're joined now by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State and former CIA Director Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, we've now seen Vladimir Putin sent the message to the world yesterday and then sent in what he's calling, quote, peacekeeping troops into two different regions of Ukraine. The White House went from calling it an incursion into an invasion. Is this just the beginning, or is there still a chance to stop Putin here, which are these disputed territories that have gone back and forth?
Jordan, we've been talking about this for weeks. We've seen this coming. More importantly, we'd seen the fact that America had lost its capacity to deter Vladimir Putin. All the work that we had done over the course of 4 years to convince Putin that this kind of activity wasn't worth the candle was thrown away. And now, frankly, as I stare at what he's done so far and the already weak response demonstrated by this administration, I don't know what his decision will ultimately be, but I am convinced that we haven't done enough to make him change the kind of behavior that we can see.
Mike, the president sent out 2 years ago today, to the very day, a tweet involving Vladimir Putin. Let me read it to you. It says, Vladimir Putin doesn't want me to be president. He doesn't want me to be our nominee. If you're wondering why, it's because I'm the only person in this field who's ever gone toe-to-toe with him. You've met with Vladimir Putin as Secretary of State. You know what he's like. Do you think he's intimidated by Joe Biden right now?
You don't have to guess. We can see it. We can see it not only, by the way, we're talking about Ukraine today, but the activity that they're undertaking in Syria, the fact that they shut down an American pipeline. Don't forget, not too terribly long ago, they shut down the Southeast gasoline pipelines from Russia. There's no evidence that that Vladimir Putin is remotely concerned about something Joe Biden will do in response. We should have months ago begun to ramp up American energy production so we could provide natural gas. We're about to have massive gas prices, natural gas price spikes inside of Europe. This does not bode well for their economies, and it benefits Vladimir Putin greatly. We shut it off here, and we allowed the Saudis and the Russians to make a lot of money.
So Germany announced they're going to suspend certification for now of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Biden, we have some sanctions on. I don't even know how that works, Secretary Pompeo, and the Treasury Department figures out how do you sanction these two small regions, and they only apply to so the sanctions they've announced only apply to those regions. So there's no mass sanctions yet that have been announced on Russia as the federation or on its specific individuals like Putin and his top command. But now that Germany's taken that action, the UK is supposedly preparing some bank sanctions. Again, we've been calling on these countries to do this, but we thought it only worked if you do it before an invasion begins. Now, I think there's some semantics around whether the invasion has begun yet, but is this all too little too late, or there's still a window here?
Well, Jordan, the invasion has most certainly begun. There's no doubt about that. These aren't peacekeeping forces. They have surrounded Ukraine and now moved actual combat assets across the boundary of Ukraine, the sovereign boundary of the nation of Ukraine. I saw some pictures. We have friends there. I saw some pictures today of Ukrainian soldiers getting ready. They were with Ukrainian Orthodox Church leaders praying for themselves in battle. There's no doubt that this invasion has begun. The work that we can do has to continue. We should support Ukraine, its capacity to resist. We should move forces, NATO forces, into the Baltic states, in Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania. We should sanction the metals of Russia. We should sanction the energy coming out of Russia. All of those things are things we can do to diminish Vladimir Putin's continued wealth and capacity to foist his own views on people who just want to be in a different place. We fight for freedom fighters in Cuba. We want people of China to be free. We want the people of Ukraine to have the capacity to have their own sovereign choices as well.
It was fascinating yesterday, Mike, when when Vladimir Putin made his speech. He gave the history of the kind of the modern Soviet Union, going back to the times right after the Tsars, talked about the Bolsheviks, talked about Lenin, talked about Stalin, and then talked about the great giveaway of all their territory. Meanwhile, we saw during the Olympics, Putin and Chairman Xi meet at the Olympics. What do you think China is looking at right now as it relates to this Russian invasion?
Well, Jay, you first spoke about the history of Russia that Vladimir Putin recounted. I can't tell you how many times I heard similar stories from him and from Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and from my counterpart at CIA, Narishkin. They all tell this history that is just a fake, right? It's propaganda more than actual history. Xi does the same thing. He talks about the Middle Kingdom. He talks about the history of the great Chinese Empire. These are two leaders who are delusional about their own nation's place in the world. They think they are designed to dominate Europe and, in Xi's case, dominate the world. As he watches Putin move and sees little resistance from the West, there is no doubt that places like Taiwan, places like Tibet, the Uyghurs in the West feel as if they are alone and under an even greater threat from Xi Jinping.
You tweeted today, for 4 years, the left parroted the hoax that our administration, the Trump administration, was weak on Russia, but they didn't dare invade Ukraine on our watch, but now they do. Who do you think Putin feared more? I mean, what could Biden do at this point? I mean, he gave up sanctions before this would occur. So did Europe. They didn't do it either. They're all taking post-invasion actions. So is there anything they can do at this point outside of military action to stop, which doesn't look like any of them are interested in doing? And if they haven't sold that to the American people at all either, but through diplomatic work.
Jordan, there's a lot of tools that are still in the toolkit. When you're on your back foot, the first thing you have to do is regain your balance and then get back on your front foot. That's what they need to do. I hope the president, when he speaks in an hour or so, will do just that. I hope he will demonstrate that America is going to use its sovereign capacity to help the Ukrainian people. I talked about a few of them. Sanction the oligarchs in Russia. Vladimir Putin is highly dependent on them. Sanction every individual who was in the room when they made the decision to be the aggressor against the Ukrainian victims. Go after their metals industry, go after the economy, support the efforts of NATO to move forces to secure the other parts of Europe as well. Those are things that Vladimir Putin will see, and he will see steel and resolve rather than mush, and he will stop pushing the West around.
Secretary Pompeo, we always appreciate your insights on all of this and appreciate the work you've done. I just want to ask one last thing. You, as I said, you've met with him. You know him. How serious should the world be taking Vladimir Putin's actions right now? You have sat across the table from him.
Vladimir Putin has always been someone who does what he says he's going to do, or at least gives his level best to do so. They break promises, contracts, they break nuclear agreements, but Vladimir Putin has made clear that the dissolution, the dissolving of the Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe of this last century, and he wants to rectify it. We should take him at his word. You can't trust him an inch. We never trusted him an inch. But you can take that his intentions are the things that he said. When you heard him speak yesterday, he has every intention of following through on those things. And only when the West resists will he back down from them.
All right, Secretary Pompeo, we know we'll be going back to you throughout this because it looks like it's just beginning.